Thank you for inviting me to share my thinking on the changing needs and expectations of library users. I'm delighted to be here in Mexico City. This is my second visit in Mexico and my first visit to Mexico City, and I hope there'll be many more in the years to come. I also think places like UNAM, which is the largest university I ever visited. I've heard a figure of 300,000 students. This is the largest I've ever known. It's a very impressive place, a place full of energy, and a place where lots of change is taking place. And a lot of that change is happening in all of our users, our undergraduate students, and our faculty. I would also like to thank our excellent translators before I move on. So, an overview of what I will cover. I will venture to discuss a few approaches with you with a major emphasis on some of the live call trends that we've been seeing from the data we've been collecting over the last 10 years. But I will also highlight that some other studies are offering corroborating evidence of those trends. And the other studies I'll briefly highlight is some of the anthropological research that Susan Gibbons and Nancy Foster have initiated, initially at the University of Rochester, but their methods have been applied in many different settings. I will also highlight to you briefly some of the LibValue work in terms of how Carol Tenopir from the University of Tennessee is looking at some of the profiles we can create for our users. There is also another study that offers corroborating evidence, the Ithaca studies. They are doing triennial faculty surveys, and some of their findings corroborate some of the other studies. There is a survey that you may not be as familiar with called the Mesa survey. It stands for Measuring Information Services Outcomes. It's a survey applied mostly in liberal arts colleges in the US. And my current boss, Elliot Shore, the relatively new ARL executive director, he was at Bryn Mawr, one of these small liberal arts colleges, before he came to ARL. And this is where this tool was developed, and some of the findings corroborate what we see in LiveQual. And last, I'm going to highlight a couple of things from another protocol we've supported and developed at ARL called the MINDS for Libraries protocol. MINDS stands for Measuring the Impact of Networked Electronic Services. And it's a brief survey that people get when they try to download electronic resources. So many of you have heard about LiveQual, and there is a strong and rich stream of research. But for those of you who haven't heard of it, this is the model that describes what LiveQual measures. It's a measure of library service quality, and it has been extensively researched, and it is a valid and reliable psychometric instrument. So it's a standardized user survey. It captures three elements of service quality: effect of service, library as place, and information control. And it's worth highlighting the concepts that each one of these dimensions captures. So effective service entails elements of empathy, responsiveness, assurance, and reliability. This is the human interaction, how users interact with library staff. Library as place encompasses elements of utilitarian space. Yesterday, those of us who visited the wonderful building, the World Heritage Library that's on this campus, have seen a lot of students using that building. So that's the element that describes the utilitarian approach of that space. We've also seen how that building serves as a symbolic presence. Okay, so the survey we have captures that symbolic element, and it also has an element of refuge, where you try to find a home away from home, a place where you can hide. There was a very nice walled garden next to the reading room we were visiting, where people were sitting on the benches, enjoying some of the music that was coming over the wall. So it was a refuge. The third element, which is probably the one that's increasing in importance, as we can see from the data, is the element of information control. And it has elements of both access and content. We have seen through the user behavioral data we have captured with LightPoll that access and content has merged in the minds of our users. As we had data that showed that they were concepts that were more distinct in the early part of the century, in the first few years of this century, and by 2003 those two concepts merged in the minds of our users. The information control concept also encompasses elements of ease of navigation, timeliness, the availability of equipment, and a very important concept called self-reliance. I think many of our users have talked about the changing behavioral environment, and I think this self-reliance concept that makes every user a writer, every user a reader, every user a creator, speaks very deeply to this element. So this is the model, and there is a rich literature behind it. It's being built on the models developed in the services marketing field. There is a very rich literature by people like Barry Zafel and Parasuraman that developed extensive conceptualizations of what services marketing is. People in the field like Danuta Niteki experimented with those models in the 90s. They had a survey called ServQual that was used by many libraries. Danuta's dissertation, award-winning dissertation, was using ServQual at the University of Maryland. So it was part of that tradition that we build upon, and with Texas A&M we build a model that's a lot more tailored to the library reality, and this is the model primarily authored by Colleen Cook and Fred Hill. Now the actual survey, for those who haven't seen it, looks like this, and here are the questions that capture some of the elements we talked about. Now, the survey itself has a very unique way of capturing expectations and perceptions of library performance. And this has come to us from the early developers of ServQual, and we have carried it forward to LightQual. For each item, the first item here is employees who instill confidence in users. We are capturing on a scale from 1 to 9 minimum service level expectations. What's your minimum service level you expect when it comes to employees who instill confidence to users when you visit this library? What's the second column here captures desired expectations. What's the desired service level you expect? So the area between minimum and desired expectations is technically called the zone of tolerance. You have a certain tolerance. Some people may be intolerant. Some people may just have minimum and desired expectations be the same score. But most people have a range of tolerance and some flexibility when they go and experience the service. And the third column here captures the performance of the library on this item For the most part, you expect the performance rating to be within the zone of tolerance. And that's the case for the most part. There are circumstances, though, where performance ratings exceed desired expectations. And there are circumstances where performance ratings do not meet minimum these expectations of our users. I want to show you how a library, Texas A&M, since this is the birthplace, has used some of these data over time. So for this item, library space that inspires study and learning, and for the group of undergraduate students, we have data every year that capture how undergraduates feel about library space. Each bar, each gray bar, brownish bar here, is defined by the zone of tolerance. The lower part of this bar is the average score for minimum expectations. The upper part of this bar is the average score for desired expectations. And this red dot is how the library has performed in relation to those expectations. So over time, we have seen for this item a slight decline on how they perceive the inspiration of the space in terms of study and learning. However, this trend for Texas A&M is compared with a peer group, another group of libraries that have done this protocol, and they want to compare their ratings against. So this green line is the peer group rating on perceptions, and we see that the peer group rating here, for all the years we have data, falls behind the Texas A&M perceived scores. Both of those scores are within the zone of tolerance, minimum desired expectations, minimum expectations. So that's the trend. And a library like Texas A&M can use that trend to say, okay, I'm fine with this rating. I'm satisfied that my performance is higher than other peer groups, and I can consciously make a decision to focus on other things. At some point, when I see this maybe getting too close and my peer group's catching up with me, maybe I will want to change my strategy and invest more on that space. So that's how some of these data can be used locally for decision making. Now, what do these data, and we have a lot of data, we have about 200,000 users responding to the survey from about 100 libraries from about 200 libraries every year. And the data I've analyzed here for you, and we'll see in the next set of slides, is actually capturing the ARL research libraries. So it captures about 20 to 25,000 users for the most part. The data we will see will focus on specific questions. One question related to effective service, giving users individual attention. Two questions from the library space dimension, library space that inspires study and learning, community space for group learning and group study, and 4 questions for information control, making electronic resources accessible, print library materials I need, a library website enabling me to locate information, and print and or electronic resources I need for my work. So, are you ready? It's going to be a series of charts that will look the same at first glance, that I'll highlight for you the differences there. For every one of those questions, we're going to see a chart that looks first at the undergraduate students, and then for the same question, we'll look at the chart for faculty. Okay? So, ready? Let's go. Undergraduate students, giving users individual attention. This is the item that gets the lowest rating when it comes to undergraduate students. So from a scale of 1 to 9, overall you'll see that this item will be on the lower part of the graph. And for undergraduate students, it's the lowest item. So for every year, we have data. Okay, this axis is the chronological axis from 2003 to 2011. And for every year, we have a little blue line that's defined by the minimum expectations and the desired expectations. And this yellow diamond in the middle captures the perceived average score across all those users. So on this item, we've been doing pretty well. We are within the zone of tolerance for all the years, and perceptions are slightly increasing, approaching more the desired expectations. For faculty, now they have overall a sense that we are doing better in terms compared to the undergraduate students. Their rating overall, both for minimum and desired expectations as well as perceptions, is a little bit higher on the scale. Now their perceptions are actually a little bit steeper and approaching more the desired level. So faculty think we're doing much better on this item compared to undergraduate students. Next question. Library space that inspires studying and learning. For undergraduate students, a relatively good rating in the sense that it's within the zone of tolerance for all the years we have data. And it's also a perceived rating that's slightly improving over time. However, our distance from perceived to desired is pretty sizable for the undergraduate group. And this is, again, when it comes to library space that inspires study and learning. Now let's look at faculty. Okay. There we start seeing some differences. We see that faculty expectations are declining. Both their minimum and their desired expectations are declining in terms of library space that inspires study and learning. And their perception score in terms of how we are doing as libraries is approaching their desired expectations. So they will tend to be less inclined to support efforts that would improve major space renovations. So we need to be cognizant of that. The next space item was community space for group learning and group study. And undergraduate students overall think we are doing relatively well. We are within the zone of tolerance, and they think we are improving. Our perception scores are improving. At the same time, both desired and minimum expectations are also increasing. So there is more need for that for undergraduate students. How about faculty? Well, faculty think we've already offered more than enough group study space. Okay? Again, something we need to be cognizant about, because if we rely only on what faculty perceive for our libraries, we couldn't make as strong a case. However, if we bring to them the data and the perceptions from the undergraduate students, we have a higher likelihood of convincing them that we do need still our spaces. So moving on into information control. Ready? Now when it comes to making electronic, I think we are doing pretty well. Their ratings for all this period is within the zone of tolerance. And their expectations for electronic resources is slightly on the decline. Isn't this interesting? Okay, they are finding a lot of their content probably in other areas. So the electronic resources from the library is not as critical to them. Now for faculty though, isn't that interesting? We do not meet faculty minimum expectations when it comes to making electronic resources accessible from my home or office. And this is a trend across all these research libraries from 2003 to 2011. We're definitely improving. Our authentication systems are becoming better. We're investing more because we are seeing complaints, we are seeing data like this. Yet we have some more work to do to make those electronic resources easier to use. When it comes to the printed library materials I need for my work, what do undergraduate students think? They are happy with us. Their perceptions scores, the red line here, is within the zone of tolerance for all these years. It's improving over time. In general, their expectations are declining. So the amount of print people expect from libraries is not as much. When we look at the same question for faculty, we see an interesting trend. We see that faculty did expect and wanted libraries to have more print in the early part of the century. We were not meeting their minimum expectations when it came to print. However, around 2008, they started shifting too. So at 2008, we met as a large cohort of research libraries. These are general trends. We met their expectations in terms of the print delivery, and we are improving constantly ever since. So we are within the zone of tolerance now when it comes to print materials. By the time we meet their desired expectations, there might not be any need for print, right? So the next item, print and or electronic journal collections I require for my work. Undergraduate students, we are performing well. The red line is within the zone of tolerance. Our performance is improving across time, and expectations, again, the desired expectations on a slight decline. I think the interesting trend of slight decline on the electronic side of the desired expectations is very interesting, something we want to watch. Clearly, we do not have a monopoly in content delivery anymore, and these data basically tell us that in the electronic environment, people will look and find the information elsewhere. When it comes to print and or electronic journal collections I need for my work, we do not meet the faculty minimum expectations. Faculty's perceptions are less than minimum expectations. And to me, this is really striking because these are the research libraries that are buying hundreds of thousands of journal titles. Pretty much all the journal titles you would want. I think we have been missing something here. We need to be doing a lot better marketing. Maybe the way our interfaces, the way we aggregate and present that content to users needs to be rethought. Things are still fragmented, different publishers, different platforms, different products. It's not as easy as just doing a Google search and getting what you need right there and then. So we definitely have a lot more work to do here. So, a library website enabling me to locate information on my own. Undergraduate students. It's pretty flat over the last decade. It's a decent rating. It's within the zone of tolerance, but there is a lot of room for improvement on our websites for undergraduate students. For faculty, we not only do not meet their minimum expectations, but our performance is slightly getting worse, partly because their expectations for having a website that's more enabling are increasing. Their minimum expectations are increasing. Again, an area where we need to be doing a lot more work. Our websites need to be a lot more intuitive, a lot more easy to navigate and access. Now, some of the corroborating evidence I mentioned to you, I was going to bring to you. This is some of the latest work Nancy Foster published, where she was looking at institutional repositories and how faculty and students, graduate students and undergraduates, use institutional repositories, and some implications for web design work. In general, she finds faculty members are all business, graduate students are heavy users of the library catalog, search box, interlibrary loan and databases, and undergraduates use the library homepage in a completely different way, a website that reflects the total integration of work and play. Link value work. Understanding our users, understanding their profiles, understanding the different segments and needs is something Carol Tenopir has emphasized. Here is a profile of a faculty member who's an award-winning, prolific staff member. And what does that look like? It looks like someone who reads more of every type of material, spends more time per book and other publications, readings, uses the library for articles primarily. And as you remember from the charts, we do not quite meet their minimum expectations there, so we need to be doing something different there. This person would buy books and obtain other publications from the internet on their own, and occasionally will participate and create social media content. And I think our next speaker will tell us more about the social media element. Now, the Ithaca SNR faculty survey, this is only a faculty survey. It's done every 3 years. And it's done to some extent from the perspective of a vendor or publisher. The strategy of approaching vendors and publishers, getting good relationships with our faculty, I think has created an interesting challenge for libraries oftentimes, because these are also oftentimes the people who perceive less value when it comes to library services. Now, faculty perceive less value from many functions of the academic library. The gateway function, though, is experienced a perceived resurgence in perceived value. So figuring out how to get those websites better for our faculty and our undergraduates is what this speaks to. Now, also, a minority of faculty sees the library as primarily responsible for teaching research skills to undergraduates, and a minority who wish to see substantial change to library staff and buildings has increased. So maybe we are doing a little bit of a better job telling our faculty that our undergraduates need our buildings. Our buildings are important as symbols. You can recruit better faculty by having a strong library. The Mesa survey, they have found differences in how faculty and students use the library. Faculty use the online library catalog, the databases and the library website. Students used public computers in the library and quiet workspace in the library. Faculty reported a much higher use of online resources from off-campus. And when it comes to trends, because this survey also is done annually across a number of different institutions, they see both faculty and students increasingly using more and more electronic resources. And whereas other usage of other services declines for faculty over time. So I want to speak a little bit about the concept of self-reliance, because I think this is what's driving a lot of what we see in these trends and where we need to be investing in the future. This quote is a quote from the interviews we did, Colin Cook and Fred Heath did in the early part of the development of LiveQual, and using those interviews and analyzing them, we developed then the survey questions. So this faculty member basically said, first of all, I would turn to the best search engines that are out there. That's not a person as so much as an entity. In this sense, librarians are search engines or entities with a different interface. We were chatting in our group last night about the information floating around and somehow having all these entities that intuitively and immersively will just come into your brain. You'll breathe them in. You'll breathe the energy of the library. I think Professor Woodsatz mentioned about the library being energy and won't be lost as a result. So it's this. I think this is the kind of feeling that self-reliance captures. So, as a result, access to electronic resources is becoming more important. And what I'm going to show you in the next 3 slides are data from the Minds for Libraries implementations we did, measuring the impact of networked electronic services. These were 2 large-scale implementations we did in Canada with the Scholars Portal environment they have there. It's the group of the Ontario Council of University Libraries that has come together and has created the Scholars Portal, where users, faculty, and undergraduate students from all the academic libraries in Ontario have access to the electronic resources Scholars Portal is making available. So the data we have captured, and we did this survey in 2005 and again in 2010, and these are the data from the latest implementation, show, for example, diversity in the way users from different disciplines approach electronic information. All disciplines are not at the same stage of development when it comes to electronic information. It used to be that the sciences group was the heaviest group for usage of electronic information in 2005, and we saw that by 2010 it's the medical sciences group, the health sciences group, and the humanities is increasing. A couple more years down the road, it'll be interesting to see where that shift is. In terms of the user status, we are seeing the undergraduate students being the largest group of electronic resources, and this is a group that increased too compared to 2005. Now, a very interesting question Minds for Libraries asks is about the location of the library user when they download the article. And it asks them to indicate whether they are downloading the information while they are in the library, whether they are downloading it while they are on campus, but not in the library, or whether they are downloading it while they are off campus. The largest group, of course, downloads electronic information from off campus, and it is 68%. It was 68% in 2010. This use from off campus was 45% in 2005, and by 2015, 2020, it's something to watch. And it is the element that is scalable, that's increasing rapidly, and it has a lot of implications for the services we provide. So we've seen that change is taking place, and we need good evidence to be able to make a different case for different stakeholders We oftentimes see the need in large research libraries and larger organizations to have a dedicated person that would capture the data and build the case for the library and analyze the data, but it has to be done in a way that will inform both the library strategy, but furthermore the university strategy. Libraries are tied to the future of the university. Academic libraries are tied to the future of the university. And what's the strategy that is important is as much the library strategy as it is the university strategy. It's the alignment of these two strategies together. We do offer a forum where people come together and talk about how they align their efforts in the library with the larger university efforts. And I'd like to take the opportunity to invite you next August to Seattle in Washington. We have our biennial conference, the Library Assessment Conference. This is the Suzzallo Library at the University of Washington campus. It's very Gothic. I think we've seen a lot of wonderful examples of Gothic architecture in this country. I hope to see some of you in Seattle. Thank you.